Okay, so the next step is defining of the inventory of. So when you are continuing with the setups for the subledger, which is AP, it is mandatory that we need to have a inventory. Even though, so let us assume that even though you are not using the inventory module functionality, but it is mandatory that you need to create at least a dummy inventory of. The reason being, the one of the step in the accounts payable module setup is like financial options, and in the financial options you need to specify what exactly is your default inventory of. So from that particular perspective, you need to have at least a dummy inventory of. So all those organizations which do not want to use the inventory module needs to still create a dummy inventory of. So whether you call it as a dummy or the real inventory of, there needs to be a one inventory of. So as far as this is concerned, I had already created the inventory org. So I do not want to spend time on the creation of the inventory org in the training session, because that is the outside the scope of our training session. I'll continue with the other steps, that financial options and payable options. But as far as the inventory org is concerned, I had already created, because that is one of the prerequisite for us. So I'll just show you the, I mean, this particular BR100 has got all those screenshot and all these steps which are required, but we will not get into the details of each and every field as far as the inventory org is concerned. Okay, I'll show you that screen. You need to go to inventory responsibilities, setup, organizations, organization. So you need to click on new and then start creating the inventory org. So I had already created, so I need to query for that. Okay, so this is the inventory org, and here classification you can see inventory organization. Click on others, and first thing is click on accounting information. So this is where you can see. So your inventory org is at this level, and after operating unit, inventory org will be at the lowest level. So inventory org will have a link to operating unit, legal entity, and ledger. So Reliance inventory org is linked to a primary ledger of Reliance INR ledger and legal entity of Reliance Communications and operating unit of Reliance Postpaid. Okay. And there are a couple of other things like inventory information and receiving information. These are all used only in the inventory module. Inventory module, all these options are used in the inventory module and also in the purchasing module to a certain extent. So we'll not get into details of all these things. So most of these I had actually copied from the vision operations. Similarly, the last step is receiving information. So this receiving information details are actually used in the purchasing receipt.
One question, Arvind. When you are creating that inventory org, right? Though it is a dummy, the location and address can be same as our legal entity.
Of
I
course,
mean, ideally,
it can be same. It can be same or it can be different. It doesn't matter, because see, legal entities, your the address which you generally specify for your legal entities, your registered office address. So Reliance Communication is registered in, say, Gujarat, Maharashtra. Okay, maybe Maharashtra. Sorry, Mumbai, Maharashtra. So you can give the address of Maharashtra address for Reliance Communication when you are creating a legal entity. But your inventory org can be located anywhere in India, or it could be in a different country. That's a different story. But it can be located anywhere in India. Just for
so
because
it can be.
I do not want to create a new location, so I just use the existing location.
Okay.
Because from a system perspective, the linkage is this one. What is the ledger name and what is the legal entity? That is what is the system linkage. It doesn't check whether the location of your inventory org and Reliance Communication, that's the legal entity, is same or not. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's with regard to the inventory org. Okay, now, okay, the first important step in the AP module is financial options. Okay, as of now, whatever the steps which you have done is outside of the AP, but they are dependent on AP. So the creation of the employees, creation of the inventory, creation of the responsibilities, running of the replicate seed data, whatever I have explained you, all those are outside of the AP, but dependent on AP. Now we are getting into the actual AP responsibility to start with the actual setups. Payables, super user, Reliance postpaid, INR. So the first step is setup, options, financials. Okay. So as we have seen in GL, we have got something called future enterable periods, wherein in the future enterable periods you can enter the transactions, but you cannot post them. Similarly, in AP also we have got a future enterable period. So we have entered a future enterable period of say 1 in our GL. So for AP also we'll use the future enterable period as 1. And next thing is default liability account. So whenever you create an invoice in AP, the default journal entry is, let me go to the planning notes. Okay, so whenever you create an invoice in AP, the default journal entry is the expense account whatever you have entered in AP distributions is debited, and the liability account will be credited. So this is the simple journal entry: expense account debit, your liability account credit. And whenever you make a payment, liability account will be debited, because you need to take the liability out, $1,000 or 1,000 INR, and cash account will be credited. So just remember these two basic journal entries.
Arvind, can you mention the event beside to it?
Okay, so this is invoice, this is payment. Okay, so I repeat, as far as the invoice is concerned, expense account which is mentioned in the AP distribution will be debited, and the liability account will be credited. And when you make a payment, obviously when you make a payment, it is a payment against an invoice. So whatever the liability account which you have mentioned here will be debited, and cash account will be credited. So one of the production support issue I can explain here. Like, so in couple of cases, in our case, like what has happened is, user has created an AP invoice, and on the same day he made a payment of the AP invoice. So when he is running a create accounting, he did not run the create accounting program. Okay, he just manually went to the payment and tried to click on create accounting. That is possible. You can directly go to the, we can see that in our next sessions, when you can directly go to the AP payment, click on actions, create accounting. So he's trying to create an accounting for payment, but system is not allowing you to create a payment for the accounting. The reason being, from an Oracle perspective, you cannot create a accounting for payment unless until the accounting is completed for the invoice. So in this case, his mistake is, I mean, he raised a ticket, and then we found out the reason is, I mean, obviously your create accounting program or the I mean, he's getting a proper error message saying that you cannot account and payment unless the invoice is accounted. So the solution would be, go to the invoice, run create accounting for that, and once it is accounted, come back to the payment and do the accounting for that. Okay, so these are the main two accounting entries. So the reason why I'm explaining these accounting entries is, here you can see a liability account. So whatever the liability account which you mentioned in the financial options will get defaulted to the supplier, and from supplier it gets defaulted to the invoice, and then system will use that particular liability account and create this particular journal entry when you are doing an accounting for that particular invoice. Okay, so here we are mentioning a default liability account. So the hierarchy is, first system will, all the accounts whatever we are mentioning here are specified here, and then these accounts will get defaulted to the something called your supplier or supplier side, and from supplier or supplier side it gets defaulted to your invoice. So at the end of the day, when system is running a create accounting, it is going to check what exactly are these accounts, maybe liability account or prepayment account in the invoice level, and at the invoice level it gets defaulted from the supplier side. If there is no details in the supplier side, Okay, then at an invoice level it gets defaulted from the financial options, and in the financial option these are mandatory, especially these liability, prepayment and discount account are mandatory. Okay, so we will mention the default liability account. So what is my default liability account? 2210. And default prepayment account, so I'll explain you what is a prepayment during when I get into the different kinds of invoices. What is my prepayment account? Prepayment is nothing but an advance. So again, as far as these accounts are concerned, your business user will be able to provide you the actual national accounts which needs to be used. And discount account 7825. And all other pivot rate, variance, gain, loss, all these are optional, but we can just enter them. Pivot, variance, loss. So these pivot rate, variance, loss are used in the purchasing module when there is an exchange gain. When there is a, I think there is a exchange gain or loss. That's not accepting. Okay, accepting. That's fine. Okay, so this is the accounting part. Now going back to the supplier purchasing tab. So here you can see inventory organization is mandatory. So this is the reason why I had created a dummy inventory org. So as soon as I click on drop down, automatically it is getting populated. So can you tell me like how it got populated here, or like why only one inventory org is coming in the drop down?
We created only
Because
one
of the
inventory
linkage to OU, right?
Exactly. So when you are creating an inventory org, in the inventory org definition, we have already linked it to the legal entity. The corresponding, we have already mentioned the corresponding legal entity, operating unit, as well as the ledger name. Okay, so this is the inventory org name, and here you can see it is RPP hyphen Reliance inventory org. This is the code for the inventory org. So when you are creating an inventory org, we need to specify a code. So going back to our setup, so in the Reliance inventory org, yeah, here we are specifying a code RPP. So that's a 3-letter short code which we need to associate to a inventory org. So so in the drop down it is coming it as RPP hyphen. So RPP is like inventory organization code hyphen organization name. So RPP hyphen Reliance inventory org. Okay. So we'll not get into this encumbrance. We are not using encumbrance. Tax will not get into this at this stage. And human resource. So business group is Vision Corporation. So the HR business group, which is mentioned at the uh, site level. So Niranjan, this is one example. Like HR business group is at a site level. So we did not mention any other business group at the responsibility level. So whatever is mentioned at the site level is defaulted here. Okay. And expense reimbursement address. So this is basically used for the expense reports. So whenever an expense reports are entered by, expense report is also one of the invoice types. So maybe I think I'll better explain that when I get into that invoice type. And employee numbering is automatic. And what is the next number? I think there are already certain numbers which are already used, so it is giving it as 2610. Okay, and if you want to use the invoice approval hierarchy, you need to check the checkbox of use approval hierarchy. Save. Legal status conversion on record one, insert to change.
Is this use approval hierarchy is for the invoice level and payment level both, or
Only for invoice level. In general in AP we do not have an approval for payment. The reason being there is an approval functionality for invoice. So what Oracle is saying is, if you are already approving an invoice, why do you want to again approve payment? Okay, but when you are using a payment batch functionality like PPR, there is something called payment batch functionality. There are a couple of steps. So in those steps, you can actually put some kind of a restrictions wherein like at this particular stage, I do not want to proceed further unless until it is approved by my payment supervisor or payment manager, something like that. Okay, but in a nutshell, for an invoice, we have got an approval functionality. We do not have such kind of a direct approval functionality for a payments, but there is an indirect way of approving the payment process. Okay, that
Okay, what is the hierarchy? If you check this one, Arvind?
Sorry.
In general, seated function, is it a supervisor or what is the hierarchy it takes if I simply check this box?
One is the supervisor hierarchy, and we can also integrate your AP module with an AME, and then you can write all rules whatever you want, whether you want to go by supervisor, whether you want to go by the invoice amount, invoice line number, and whatever it is. As you know, like in AME, you can write any number of rules there.
And I mean, if you check this option, it will take supervisor. That's my understanding, right?
Use approval hierarchies. I don't remember exactly. It's whether it's a supervisor or position based. I think it's a supervisor, if I remember it correctly.
Okay, then if I want to tag it to AME, do we have any other setup or this is the only screen which you need?
No, if you want to use AME, the first thing is you need to go to the system administrator. So for your application of payables, there is a profile option called AME installed. You need to set it as yes. So when you say AME installed as yes for your payables application, then it will not look into those whether it's a supervisor or position hierarchy. It will directly look for your AME rules. So once you set this particular profile option, then you need to go to your AME, your application, approval management engine responsibility, and then you need to create your own rules.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is the linkage to AME to the AP module.
Exactly. Yes. So in this case, as we did not mention anything, it is looking at the site level. Even in the site level, the AME installed is no. So that means it will not even look for AME rules. It will look for within the system, like within AP, like supervisor hierarchy or position hierarchy.
Okay.
So going back to the financial options. So we have completed the financial options, and the next thing is payables system setup. So the navigation is setup options, payable system setup options, payable system setup. Again, these are the default values. You need not do anything. So what is my supplier numbering? So whenever I'm creating a supplier, whether you want to go for automatic numbering or manual numbering, so generally everybody will go for the automatic numbering. And what is my starting number? It is driving some system generated number, so we can leave that as is. What is my invoice or match option? Whether you want to go for two-way matching or three-way matching. If you want to go for two-way matching, then you need to say invoice match option is purchase order. That is, you want to match your invoices to purchase orders. If you want to go for three-way matching, then you need to match your invoice to the receipt. So these purchase orders or receipts are from the PO module. And if you always ensure that definitely for each and every invoice there should be a link to your purchase order, then you need to check the checkbox of hold unmatched invoices. So that means if there is any invoice created directly in AP without the corresponding link to the purchasing module, then automatically a hold will be created on that particular invoice, and you will not be able to proceed further on that invoice. So you cannot validate that invoice, you cannot make the payment, you cannot do accounting for that particular invoice. Okay. So as we are not using the purchasing module, so we will not check that checkbox. So if you do not check the checkbox, now in our case, we can create a standalone invoices without any purchase order, and we should be able to proceed further. Okay. And what is my default invoicing currency? So as we are under Indian operating unit, so we'll say our default operating unit is INR. This is again just a default. So when you're creating again a supplier and supplier side, so when you are creating a supplier or supplier side, most of the default values will be defaulted from your financial options or payable options or this payable system setup. So these are the three options, and all these default values go to your supplier side, and in a supplier side you can make the changes. And then when you are creating an invoice, you need to select the supplier. So whatever is mentioned in the supplier or supplier side will be defaulted to your invoice. So that's how the hierarchy. So the top hierarchy is all these three options: financial options, payable system setup options, and then supplier side hierarchy, supplier or supplier side, and then the invoices. Okay. And again the default pay group is standard. So what is the, you can create your own pay groups. So pay group is nothing but a way of grouping of different vendors. And again, whatever the pay group which you have mentioned, this is the default pay group you are mentioning here. And whenever now try to create a new supplier, then automatically the pay group will be standard. And again, from this supplier, it gets defaulted to your invoice when you are creating a invoice. So the significance of the pay group is when you are actually working on the payment batch functionality, you'll better appreciate this. So when you are running a payment batch is basically a way of making of a payments to a group of invoices. So there is a lot of criteria which is mentioned in that particular screen as to what invoices you need to select when you are running a payment batch. And one of the criteria is pay group. So that means you can say that a pay group of standard. So that means all the invoices which has got a pay group of standard, I want to make a payment. Or you can say a supplier, a specific supplier name. So you can say that I want to make a payment through this particular payment batch for all the invoices of that particular supplier. And you can also mention the due date, and there are a lot of other criteria there. So that is the significance of the pay group. And the next one is term date basis. So term date basis is uh, how do you want the system? How do you want the system to calculate the payment terms? So what is the payment term? Getting back into my running notes. So take an example. You created an invoice today. You have entered an invoice in AP module today. Okay. So in AP, you should not use the word creation of invoice. You should use the word entering of the invoice or recording of the invoice. The reason being, in AP module, as I said, you are purchasing something from the suppliers. So whether you generate the invoice or you get the invoice from the supplier. It's a question.
We will get the invoices.
Yeah, we get the invoice from the supplier. So hence we should use the word we are recording the invoice or we are entering of the invoice in AP. As far as the AR is concerned, we are selling and we are giving invoice to the customer. So that means in AR we should use the word generation of invoice. Okay. So as far as the AP is concerned, we are recording the invoice, whatever we is received from the supplier on say 24th of September. And supplier says that 30 days payment terms. So when he says 30 days payment terms, so that means you are supposed to make a payment on or before roughly 23rd of October. So you got roughly 30 days of payment term. So you have time up to 23rd of October 2017 to make a payment for that particular invoice. So generally in large organizations, what they do is they actually schedule this particular payment batch program on a daily basis, and that particular program will pick up only those invoices which are due on that particular date. So all the large organizations, if you are given 30 days payment term, they will not make a payment on or before 30 days. They will make the payment only on the 30th date. So if you have got 60 days, they'll make a payment only on the 60th date. So in a large organization, there are hundreds of invoices with so many different payment terms. So nobody will remember what are those invoices which are due on that particular day, and then manually pick up each and every invoice and make the payment. So that's the reason why they will use the payment batch functionality. So you just schedule this particular payment batch program to run overnight, and it will take care of picking up all the invoices which are due on that particular date and make the payment. So it could be an electronic file transfer. If you are using electronic file transfer payment method, then automatically a payment will be completed and a file will be generated and it will be sent to the bank. And if you are using a check payment method, then payment will be processed and the checks will be printed and somebody needs to sign those checks. Or if you are using a what do you call auto check signature something, I don't remember exactly the name, but the checks can be printed from the system with the signature, and the checks will be directly dispatched to the vendors. Okay, so that is the significance of the payment terms. So here we are calculating 30 days from the invoice date, and we have got different options whether you want to calculate that 30 days term days from based on the goods received date or invoice received date or system date, something like that. Okay, so we'll go with the invoice date. And this is the payment term, default payment terms, whether it's a 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is. So here the default payment terms is immediate. So immediate is like if you receive an invoice today, you should pay it today itself. What we will do is we'll make the payment terms as, hang on, so for our testing purpose, leave it as immediate. But in a live environment, generally the payment terms will be say 30 days.